Hi, everybody. This is Damien. As you know, we're all about telling inspirational stories. So today we've got Sarah Davis. She paddled 4,000 Ks, the entirety of the Nile River. So how are you today, Sarah?
I'm really good, thanks. How are you?
Very good, thank you. So let's get started. So tell us a little bit, how did you get started? Have you always been into an outdoorsy, sporty, adventurous type life?
Yeah, I started off, grew up in the countryside, and mum was really cool. She got me from a young age trying lots of sports. You know, I think almost as soon as I could walk, I was having a go at horse riding and then tennis, ice skating lessons, squash, all the school sports. So it was really good sort of grounding to one, that building some of those skills, and two, that appetite to just and confidence to go and try lots of different sports. And that's certainly something I think that really set me up for life. The windsurfing lessons, water skiing, gymnastics, like there's just been so much. And yeah, so I think that helped sort of build that, as I say, that confidence to go and try things and being comfortable, in the outdoors, and I got a lot from it, from the sport and the activities. So I love the countryside. I was a bit of a tomboy. And I remember when I was about 7, we moved to much more of to the town.
Yeah.
And I hated it. I went from having fields at the back that I could just like run wild to then just this small garden, and it was all paved. There wasn't even any grass. And I was mortified. I hated it. And then, ended up going and living in cities, moved to London, and sort of went down the sort of the more traditional path of, you go to uni and get a career and start doing that. But all sort of underneath that, I guess I just sort of felt like I was a bit of a square peg being forced into the round hole, and, it didn't quite feel right. But then I'm quite sort of, I think in a lot of ways, quite compliant. So like carried on going with it all, but there was this sort of nagging feeling that there's something more.
Cool. So tell us, how did you get involved with paddling? So you've done a bunch of different sports. So how did you get started with paddling?
Well, it was through the surf club. So I joined when I moved from Melbourne to Sydney. It was like, okay, right, I've got to build a life again. As you'd have done multiple times, what
Yeah.
it's like. It's like, okay, find the network. And one, I wanted to do some sort of volunteer work, and I thought, well, it'd be really great to go and join the surf club, learn some new skills, help out, and meet people. And it was one of the best decisions I made. One, I got to meet incredible people, got to learn a bunch of skills, got involved in the teaching. You have to do your 10-week bronze medallion, which is pretty intense, but a lot of fun. Scared the crap out of me. We used to have some huge waves when we were going out on the boards and things. So I got involved in that. And at that point I was a runner. So long distance, so half marathon to marathon was kind of my thing. And I was really beginning to, not breaking any records, but doing reasonably well, and had a lot of goals around that. And then I started getting into, in the background, I was getting into some of the sports through the surf club. So I'd started board paddling, the swimming and the running, and just started doing surf ski paddling. And then around that time, I found out I had osteoarthritis. So I had a stress fracture, and my osteo said, let's have a look and see what's going on in your hip. We had a long-term problem. And the sports doctor came back and said, well, the good news is, yes, there's a stress fracture. Obviously, that heals very quickly. He said the bad news is you've got mild to moderate degeneration of the hip joint with the osteoarthritis and a bony spur. He's like, no more long distance running. So I was mortified. This was my thing.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, no, we can redefine that. Okay, I'll make 10K my thing, and let's see if I can start punching, break the 40-minute mark on the 10K and see how we go there. And then in the City to Surf race, which is, the big annual race from the centre of Sydney to Bondi Beach, a 14K race, and I was running it. And I'd gone into it with a slight hammy strain. At the time, I was doing some personal training. One of my clients, a few clients were doing it, so I thought, I've got to do it with them. I'll just go easy, which was really dumb because I really should know myself better. The gun goes. I can't go easy, right? I'm really competitive. And got to the top of Heartbreak Hill, and just something in my knee went, and it turned out I blew my meniscus. So I had the surgery on that, and it was just, I just had to accept that my running career was over. You know, I needed to go maintenance to kind of keep the body, you know, I mean, I will be looking at replacements at some point. And it really killed me. It was, you know, I'd let running define me. So, I mean, it ended up being a really good thing, really, really good thing for me. But at the time, I would see people doing that beautiful Bondi to sort of Bronte run along by the cliffs. I'd drive past, see people run, and I'd literally be crying. It was just like, because this had been taken away from me. But again, at the time, I knew that whole, you know, one door shuts, another one opens. And I'm like, could this door open really quickly, please? Because I need something. So I started doing more in the surf sports, more in the surf ski paddling. Found that then, okay, there's Coolangatta Gold, which is an endurance. So I'm an endurance athlete. Then I discovered, okay, there's ocean ski paddling, and that's the, you know, the long distance ski paddling competition. So you're looking at anything from some comps are down at 8Ks up to the longest one generally is Molokai in Hawaii, which is 50, 53, 54Ks.
Yeah.
And that became my sport. And I just, you know, I'm so grateful that the running was taken away from it, because I've got to compete around the world. I got to compete as an age grouper at the World Championships in Hong Kong. I just had all these extraordinary experiences, and it's the paddling community, because it is relatively small. It's really friendly, open. Everyone's really excited. It's like, oh, you're into paddling too? Oh, great. You know, so, and that's what I experienced with my Nile trip. You know, people were really excited to get involved and get behind it, you know, within the paddling community.
Okay. So paddling is something that you really enjoy. So what would you say to anyone who's never tried paddling? You know, so what would your recommendations be? You know, why should they give it a try?
Well, I mean, I just see, for me, I mean, well, I'm spoiled. Living in Sydney, I've got so many beautiful places to go paddling, like to get up in the morning and you're paddling on Sydney Harbour, and, you know, you're paddling towards the Opera House and the bridge, and the sun's coming up. It's just like, there is no better place to be. I've been out paddling multiple times, and you see dolphins. The other day, actually, it scared the crap out of me. But I was paddling along, and in the May to September, it's the whales go up north to go and breed, and then they come back down. And I was paddling on my own, and I freak out about sharks. I'm terrified of sharks. I was on my own out round the heads at Bondi, so I was a little bit tense. And then I just heard this almighty exhale, and literally 5 meters away from me, this whale had come up and then sort of went back down again.
Amazing.
It was one of those things. It was really beautiful in retrospect, but at the time it was completely terrifying. But, you know, these sorts of experiences, it's just, and, you know, for the body, it's no impact. It is something you can pick up. You know, anyone can sit on those stable plastic kayaks and paddle. Anyone can do that. And, you know, so it's finding, like, we're lucky here, there's a few groups where you can hire the stuff, because one of the slight barriers is, certainly with the ocean skis, it's reasonably expensive to buy. So you kind of want to know that you do enjoy it. So, I mean, I'd start off with the plastic, sit on kayaks and go from there, or find groups where you can go and try it out. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic sport. So there are so many places around the world that you can go and do it. You know, there's water, you do lakes, and there's so many options. You might want to do the whitewater kayaking or the canoeing, rivers, lakes, flat water, marathon, ocean, surf. Like, there's a lot. There's something for everyone in there, I think, and for all ages. Whether you know, if you've got kids, you can take the kids, sit them on the front of the kayak. You know, there's a lot of options there.
Yeah, no, sounds like a sport worthwhile giving a try. So tell me now a little bit about Null Adventure. So how did you come up with this idea? I understand you were working in risk management, so obviously that's not the picture or stereotypical person who would go off and decide to go to the other end of the world and paddle 4,000 Ks. So what inspired the idea behind the trip?
And we came back to this whole, you know, the square peg round hole sort of thing, and still looking for what it was. You know, I'd gone off and tried as a personal trainer. I spent 4 years as a personal trainer, which is great. Took a break from banking, sort of brought myself back from the devil, as I described it to people. But then I got an option to go back into banking, and it was easy. You know, it's like, this is what I've done. I know it's easier than getting up in the morning, pissing down with rain, trying to like be all, you know, bright and bushy-tailed and encouraging people to squat, lunge, push, pull, and run and do all these things. So I'd gone back to banking, and that was great. But there was just still this like, there's more, and that wanting a future that excited me. And it was when I saw a couple of what I would sort of say is ordinary people who'd gone on some expeditions. I think I've always read the books on from explorers, and just never thought that I could be the adventurer. Very few female role models doing it, and a lot of people are generally sort of ex-military and stuff like that. So it just hadn't occurred to me. But then seeing these people was like, oh, well, maybe I could go on a big expedition. Yeah. And it was then I was like, started looking, well, I want to do something paddling, like the idea of doing something that hadn't really been done. No woman had done a sort of a source to sea, like people have done big sections, but going from the source in Rwanda all the way through, human powered hadn't been done. So, and when I saw that, I was just like, it was a very visceral response. It's like, that's it. And it was just, I couldn't fully explain it. It was just like, that is what I want to do. And it was, there was sort of no doubt. So then it was like, okay, how the hell do I do this? And that was the sort of start of this incredible, incredible journey, even before the paddles hit the water.
So what was the preparation required, and how long did it take you to plan it all?
Well, I very ignorantly and arrogantly thought, oh, you know, I'm organized, I'm a project manager, I could pull this off in about 6 months. 2 years later, it was so much, because you've got, I mean, one, obviously trying to organize it all remotely is very difficult. So trying to build, networks and find out what to do. You know, there was reading books, Googling, so there was getting agreements from governments. It's not like a nice little online form when you just get your approvals. There's a lot of bureaucracy. You don't know who you're trying to contact. It's like, who do I speak to? I mean, luckily early on, I'd read a book, The Best Day Ever, by a guy called Henry Coetzee. And through that, I got in contact with someone who organizes a lot of expeditions, and has done a lot of expeditions. He did a source to sea expedition down the Nile with a group. And so I reached Pete Meredith. So I reached out to him, and he sort of gave me the real bare bones of my project plan. So then it's like, okay, I know the kind of steps I want to do, and an idea of the sort of the titles of people to speak to in the governments, what the conditions are like, so I could work out what type of craft. Like, I'm not a whitewater kayaker, so it's like, well, the whitewater sections, they need to do that in a raft. Then from here, I can do the flat water, timing of year, approximate costs, and so on. So that was, without that, I wouldn't have had a clue where to start. It would have been really difficult. And then, so then it's working out the craft. What equipment do I want? What team? How many people? Who am I going to get? You know, trying to get people involved. Building the brand. Paddle the Nile was the brand I built. The website, the intro videos, the marketing, the merchandise. You know, there's all that, which was really fun to do. You know, some of it was getting a lot of new skills. Some of it was building on existing ones. You know, from building a business, I got to use that to build this. There was hostile environment awareness training, swiftwater rescue technician, remote first aid, Krav Maga self-defense training. So there was a whole lot. And then I was doing a lot of research on sort of the mindset side of things. Like, I know I don't always, in really acute, stressful situations, like long-term stress, fine, we can deal with that. But those acute situations, I know I get that, you know, when your mind goes, you just can't think. Yeah. You suddenly got the mind of a 2-year-old, and that panic, and I do that. So it's like trying to find some mindset skills that I could potentially try and bring on. So it was amazing, but it was from when I really committed to it, about 2 years. I went to working part-time. I did have a couple of other sort of big goals I was working on, like doing the race Molokai I mentioned at the start, and then the World Championships. So that gave me a good enough base for my kayaking. Yep. I didn't go there having spent 8 hours a day paddling. It's like, there's no point. I'm prone to overuse injuries. It was, I know my body will adapt during it. I'm not doing it as a race. Wasn't trying to do it fast. So the physical side of the preparation was more building muscle, so that there's to try and prevent injuries and so on. Everything else was just organizing a lot of logistics and trying to get sponsors and raise money.
So yeah, it's quite an achievement, isn't it? Like even before you've even kicked off the actual journey.
Yeah.
So how did you finally feel when you put that boat in the water for the first time and set off?
Oh, it was amazing. Like, it had been so stressful getting from, so I sort of based myself out of Uganda, because it got to the point like, okay, I still didn't have a team, had someone potentially interested through, because I did a recce, I'd gone and done a recce to Uganda at the end of another trip before I fully committed. I'd also done a recce to, I did a trip to Egypt and Sudan to meet people locally to try and build a network. Also not sure how much support I would receive from those companies, how I would be received as a woman going off and doing it on her own. Incredible support. Like, I didn't need to worry. But yeah, so then I had a few weeks in Uganda, managed to get some of the local rafting guides to join me. Nile River Explorers, they kindly lent me all the gear, like the rafting gear.
Yep.
So it was just like crazy. I didn't know if I was going to be able to pull it off, when I got on the plane to Uganda. So then we were driving from Uganda to Rwanda, the start. And I think we went through, it was 3 cars and 4 drivers. Like, the first car broke down, then we get another car, that was great. Then we get another car in Rwanda. The day we were supposed to be going to the source, that we woke up with I had a WhatsApp message from the driver saying he'd been arrested overnight. And the car had been impounded. And it's like, what? It was just like, it's always, you always have those final tests.
Yeah.
Those final hurdles before you get there. And it was just like, I'm not stopping now. Then we had 2 flat tires. Like, we had it was ridiculous. And I was shitting myself, right? I am all the gear, no idea. I got no real idea of what I'm letting myself into, getting into. And it's like all this, okay, I did, a massive risk management plan. Like, it was great. I got to use my risk management skills. And I'd engage people, who provided advice, but there's still that, have I forgotten something really fundamental? And can I do this? But that day when we drove down and we got to the water, and it was just all those sort of, at that moment, all those worries disappeared. It's like, wow, this is really happening. And yeah, when we launched the boat, got on the raft, and that sort of first paddles hit the water, 11:32, I had to check my watch. It was just the best feeling. And it was really, it's like, even if it finished today, that was enough to have got to that point, because it had been tough, but a really enjoyable journey, because it meant so much to me. I enjoyed putting in all the work. So yeah, it was an amazing moment, and I really did. I was like, yeah, if we end it today, okay, that's cool. But obviously, it didn't.
So what were some of the more memorable moments on the trip?
The memorable ones sort of fall into 2 categories. There's the death-defying, near-death experiences, and then some of the highlights, like the landscapes and the people, were the big ones. So we had a few days where it was all going well. Day 6, we got attacked by a hippo. So she basically, we were chased, and she bit into the back of the raft, put a hole like this in the back of the raft. Something I'll never forget, feeling this tug turning around. Shit. But I did think at the time, I was like, well, at least it's like there's the length of the raft and one person between me and her. Yeah. So I'm really scared, but it's not super, super critical yet. So that was day 6. Day 8, we were coming up Rwanda, the river that we were on, the Nile, it touches on Burundi, the border of Burundi, in this lake. And then as you're sort of coming off, there were multiple channels. So we were asking some fishermen which was the right channel to take. And these other guys sort of came and took over, giving us the directions. Long story short, they said, come this way, and tricked us over the border into Burundi, because it's an unmarked border on this lake. So wait here. I'm going to call my friends, and they're going to come and help you and show you the way. He called the Burundian army. So the next thing we know, there's this tinny coming across this little tinny motorbike coming across the lake with a great big machine gun on the front, and 2 guys with their AK-47s and another guy with the machine gun. So we then get told we've got to go across the lake. We're arrested. We're questioned. They go through everything on the boat. We're put under house arrest. Luckily, I'd engaged a team. So the guy who did my hostile environment awareness training, I'd engaged them to provide, 1, daily intel reports, because, I was going through some very hostile places. I didn't have the networks and the contacts there. 2, have someone to check in with every day because of the length of the trip. I couldn't ask my friends to do that. 1, it's too long. And 2, I don't know. I couldn't come up with the protocols of how to deal with things. So I was sort of surreptitiously sending messages on the GPS to this guy, and he sort of rallied around. And after a couple of days, we got released. So that was I found that all highly entertaining. I completely underestimated the seriousness of the situation. It all felt James Bond and very exciting as I'm like surreptitiously sending messages and coming up with ploys and hiding satellite telephones and creeping out onto balconies to make calls. It could have very easily gone very downhill, and I would have been one of those people, those idiots. Why did you go and do that?
Yeah.
And then we ran some rapids that were just ridiculous. Still, I don't know how we sort of survived those. So that was all in the first 2 weeks, right? So I was like really tested early on. But a lot of those, like the day, when we ran these rapids, it was one of my big fears. I've had a near drowning experience. I'm terrified of massive surf.
Yeah.
So I'm building my confidence back up now. And the rapids really scared me. But then that day, once we got through it, because it was just this hectic experience, it was one of the best days. You know what it's like when you face a fear and you kind of overcome it and survive it. We were on such an adrenaline high, and then we just had this perfect camping spot that night that really, so typical, the umbrella tree, the acacia trees, and just this stunning Tanzanian landscapes. And it was just the best. It was one of the best days. So it was pretty extraordinary. And then things sort of chilled out a little bit, and there was just so much of got to meet more locals and see the lifestyles, in Uganda, and then very much up through Sudan, because I very deliberately only had local people with me.
Yep.
It was a very different experience to how I think, I don't know, I haven't done it any other way, but there's that instant sort of acceptance, and I just think, and then just being able to ask questions and learn about the cultures and things because I'm with local people. For me, it was a much richer experience. And I think, potentially got to see things that I might not have done if I'd been with a group of, fellow Westerners, white people.
Yeah.
Non-locals, should we just say non-locals?
No, it sounds amazing. So how long did the trip actually take in entirety?
Well, it was 6 months, but there was a lot of stop and start because, I was organising it all myself, and it was, difficult to have everything lined up, not knowing what the time. There was so much uncertainty to deal with. So, we sort of did the first section in Uganda, had 2 weeks. Next section, 2 weeks. And it's like, well, now it's Christmas. I might as well stay here for Christmas. Problems trying to get my visa sorted for Sudan. So there was a lot of stop-start. I haven't actually worked out exactly how many days I was on the water versus how many days. But it was 6 months from when I started to when I finished. Yep. It was 26th October to 19th of April, just under 6 months.
Okay. So, and then how did it feel? You've just pulled off 2.5 years basically of your life, accomplished exactly what you were planning. So how did it feel?
Look, getting to the end, there were things I'd had to miss some sections. I hadn't been able to do the whole thing. So I had to miss South Sudan from a security perspective, which is sort of another story. So it wasn't quite what it wasn't the goal of doing the whole thing. Well, I knew I was going to do all of it, but I hadn't done as much as I'd hoped.
Yep.
But I had, the why had changed quite significantly from when I'd started. So, there'd been a bit of that ego-led, I want to do the first.
Yeah.
But it had really come back far more down to it's the adventure and the challenge. Having spent, the 6 months doing it, it was amazing, but I was exhausted. And it was mentally and physically, probably as much mentally as anything else, dealing with constant uncertainty, and uncertainty of, you know, am I going to be alive in the next minute because there's a hippo up ahead?
Yep.
So some extreme stress, constantly having to problem solve. How am I going to get the kayaks to here? How are we going? The boys are too scared to do this section right now. I've got to find a car. We've got to get us around this point so that we can go back in at a point where they feel safe and comfortable. And, you know, so many months of doing that. When I got to the end, it was a real sort of whirlpool of emotions, like the excitement of having done it and achieved it. You know, it was amazing to have made it to the end, to have got to Egypt, to still be alive and all my limbs intact. As surprising as it was, exciting. There was a sadness that this journey, like you're saying, you know, it had been 2.5 years, it had been my life for 2.5 years, and that was over. But there was also a lot of relief to be away from that. I don't have to deal with the uncertainty anymore. You know, a lot of people talk about getting the post-expedition blues. It wasn't, I was just, the relief for me was like, okay, I really enjoyed that, but I'm quite happy to just get back to some of a bit of normal life. So I went back to the UK and got a lot of TLC from Mum for 5 weeks. Walked into her house, opened the fridge.
Yeah, no planning.
There wasn't much washing to give her, because I think I left most of it back there, as I never wanted to see those clothes again, and I don't think anyone would want to see me in them.
So what were some of the takeaways, things that you learned about yourself and, you know, on this trip? Because obviously there's a lot of soul searching, you know, learning about what you're actually able to do, because you've got 6 months, challenging environments.
Yeah, I think, you know, it comes down to that whole, you know, the value of pushing ourselves and getting out of our comfort zone. You know, you do learn a lot about yourself and grow, and you find strengths that you didn't know, I didn't know necessarily were there. The ability to overcome, you know, a lot of difficulty, the ability to sit with a lot of uncertainty, you know, being that flexibility to constantly improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Yep.
You know, I like problem solving. This took it to another level at times. The value of slowing down, you know, because I was forced to. I couldn't sit there, you know, and dropping, you know, not sitting on this all the time, because I didn't have Wi-Fi connection, right? Wi-Fi connection was very rare and very celebrated when I had it. You know, and just feeling that the discomfort of like, okay, I feel uncomfortable because I'm used to it, like go.
Yeah.
But then getting forced to get through that and just appreciating being present. And I'm not very good at it, but it really helped me, you know, 1, to see the value in it, and 2, to be able to practice it better. So I'd say there was that, yeah, dealing with a lot of uncertainty, you know, the value of having big goals, why I get so much out of them. You know, for me, it's all those dopamine hits, and you know, and it's just, for me, so I opened up a whole new world. It's like, great, I want to go and do more expeditions. And you know, I pushed myself so, I mean, I really did jump into the deep end with this one. Normally I'm probably a little bit more baby steps about things. But my world, you know, when you do that, your world becomes a bigger place, and mine felt an infinitely bigger place. And suddenly expeditions or challenges that would have seemed quite tough and I might have not known whether I was capable of, such as I went and did the Murray River afterwards here in Australia over sort of the Christmas summer period here, Southern Hemisphere summer, would have been quite challenging. And I was just like, and I did go into it going, so I really think you might be underestimating it, but it just felt like a walk in the park compared to the Nile. It was like own country, no governments to deal with. I mean, we've got plenty of nasties here, but you know, it's not hippos and crocodiles, because I was down, I wasn't doing it up north. So suddenly, yeah, you know, things that are way more achievable, and it sort of opened my mind to a whole bunch of new possibilities, and then more opportunities come your way, and from doing it. So yeah, I've got a huge amount out of it.
Oh, very good. So what's next on your list as adventures that you still have to tick off the list, I guess?
There's a few. So well, with me and a friend, we were going to cycle across Australia because one of the things people said to me, because of this whole post-expedition blues, I have plans for something else. And so coming towards the end of the Nile trip, I thought, it'd be really cool to cycle across Australia. I'm not a cyclist. I used to do a bit of triathlon, but I'm really not a cyclist. And then I sort of parked that because I'd done the Murray River, and coming out of during lockdown, I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to travel overseas for a while. And this idea, it's still been bubbling away. And it was this little voice in my head. And I spoke to a friend of mine. It was the first time we were allowed out to cafes and stuff after lockdown here in New South Wales. And I told her what I was thinking of doing, and her sort of eyes lit up a little bit. And I was like, well, why don't you come and join me? And long story short, she was like, okay, after she thought about it, and was like, cool, we're going to cycle across Australia. And that was when they were talking about all the internal borders dropping down. So people don't know, not in Australia, all the states have put in some hard borders, or some of them did.
Yeah.
Which means that I can't travel from New South Wales to Western Australia, and still can't. So they were talking about relaxing those borders. So we were like, okay, let's start on the 1st of October. And then Victoria cracked off again, and we had some more cases in New South Wales, and the borders never reopened, and we don't know when they are. So we've got the bikes.
Yeah. Very good.
We just can't get over there. So we're hoping even if they opened up, well, if they opened up soon, it would be okay, but we wouldn't be ready. It'll get too hot because we're going to sort of cut down. It's, so to cycle across Australia in summer wouldn't be fun. So we're hoping mid-March, March time next year, the borders will be open and we can do that trip, which will be it's 5,000 Ks, and will take us a couple of months raising money for a couple of mental health charities, Lifeline, which is a national suicide prevention support hotline and support services they provide, and Mood Active, which is a local organisation which brings exercise to people dealing with mild to moderate mental health challenges. I deal with depression. I've been clinically depressed. I've dealt with anxiety, and I know the value that exercise brings. So I'm involved with this organisation, so raising money for them. Beyond that, I really want to try and do a source to sea expedition on each continent. And hence I've done the Murray, I've done, a lot of the Nile. There are bits that I want to go back and finish off.
Yeah.
I don't think, initially I was thinking like maybe I'd do the longest. Having done these 2 trips, I've got no interest in doing the longest, because like you got the Amazon, like where you are, that's a massive trip. The Mississippi, the Volga I'd like to do in Russia, that would be cool. But I think probably finding some more interesting off the beaten path ones. There's some in Central Asia I've been looking at, so to do something there. And yeah, I think in South America there are some ones which would be slightly less onerous than the Amazon, but would be really spectacular to do. There's an ocean like a solid 1,000 K downwind paddle I'm looking at, and then I would love to row an ocean. It scares the shit out of me. It scares me so much, but I really want to row an ocean. I've spoken to people, I've listened to, read books and stuff. And I'm like, there's just part of me that goes, I really want to do it. And then the other part's going, I'm really terrified. But usually I kind of like, I get myself into these things and then realize what I've got myself into when it's too late. So I think that possibly the ocean way might be a little bit like that.
Well, we've certainly got some interesting things planned. So life is definitely not going to be boring. So what advice would you give to someone who may have been a little bit like yourself, working in a job, has a dream, has an idea of something they would like to do, but just is a little bit scared to take the first step? What kind of advice would you give to them?
Take the step. Just take the step. Break things down. Obviously for something like the Nile, it was huge, and it just found a way to break it down into really small bite-sized chunks that I could just focus on that. And I use the same approach when I was executing it. It's just, don't think about this 2,000 Ks to go. Just think about paddling to the next break. And it's like breaking things down into small bite-sized chunks, talking to people, getting advice, reading books, researching, but just do it. We regret the things we don't do. I think this time that we've gone through, everyone's going through recently, I think a lot of people have potentially, rethought about their priorities. So I'd say, jump on that and find a way to do it. And if it feels like it's too much, go and do and organize. There's some incredible adventure holidays out there, and I'd done a lot of those, which probably, which would have helped. So go and start doing those. Do it in an environment where you feel safe enough to go and take that first step, and to then maybe go out and do something on your own. If you want to do a big overland walking trip, well, go and do some stuff in back garden to begin with, and get the gear and how to use it, and then do a 2-day trip, where you're staying in campsites, and then you go and do a multi-day trip where you're not on campsites. And but always, one thing is always be safe and do the training. Have your comms, have some protocols set up. That's the risk manager in me.
No, very good advice. So now is a question that I like to ask everyone. So what's your definition of living your best life?
Living a life of adventure, of creativity, of love, of adding value, but most of all, living.
Okay, very good.
My mission statement.
That's good. It's important to have a philosophy in life, I think. So it's good to hear that you've got one. So what about, because we're both, over the 40 mark, what would your advice be to anyone who's reaching 40 or approaching 40 and is going, oh my God, it's all game over, which we know it's not true. But what would your advice be to them?
Oh my God, turning 40 was awesome. I think I found turning 30 more traumatizing. I kind of was a bit more like, oh, there's nothing I can do about this, turning 40. For me, I don't know whether a lot of people talk about it. The care factor just diminished even more, other people's thoughts, opinions, and just going, no, I've really got to live my life. I think you sort of become aware of that you are sort of getting older. And I think it drives you to go and live more. It certainly drove me to live more, because you don't have that feeling, oh, well, there's years ahead. So I think it's been the best for me. And physically, the wheels are falling off a little bit. with the arthritis and things like that, but it's like, and suddenly needing reading glasses, all that fun stuff. I did that with much longer arms. No, for me, it's been, my 40s have just been the best so far. I've loved it. So yeah, I would say get excited. Don't get worried about it.
Awesome. So now to close out, what are 3 life lessons that you've learned in life that you think would be of value to, other people?
The big one, is it's corny, it's a cliche, it's getting out of your comfort zone. We learn about so much about ourselves when we grow. We don't grow and learn sitting on the couch. You want to get fit, you've got to push yourself. You want to build muscles, you've got to go and lift weights and get uncomfortable. And I think, that whole pushing yourself and regularly doing it doesn't have to mean huge things, but just getting really comfortable with being uncomfortable. And then you start to kind of crave it. So I think that number 2, get curious. Be curious about everything. Who you are, what interests you, what drives you, where your attention takes you. I think it's very easy as we get older, as kids, when curiosity is what we're wired for, and then it kind of gets beaten out of us through school, through work and everything else. And I think keeping that lifelong curiosity, and associated with that willingness to try different things. Don't just sort of go, well, this is what I do and this is who I am. It's like, no, you don't know. You don't know what you enjoy and what your capabilities and your passions are unless you try and do different things. And I think, when you start doing all of that, your curiosity, you're trying different stuff, your ability to then, and pushing yourself, your ability to deal with life's challenges, because life does, it is going to be challenging.
Yep.
You're more likely to be able to flex and deal with those things as they come up, and adjust and problem solve. So yeah, I guess those would be the 3.
No, very good advice. So, well, thank you very much, Sarah. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm sure a lot of people get some inspiration out of this. So if anyone's interested in learning a little bit more about you and your trip around the Nile, where can I find you?
So on social media, I'm most active on Instagram, and that is Sarah Paddles. So that's Sarah with an H, Paddles, all one word. On my website, my main website now is Sarah Davis, and that's davis.co. And that sort of got links to all the other, the Paddle the Nile website with all my blogs, the Cycling Oz, so cyclingoz.com, which will have all the details of the cycling trip. But everything kind of gets based out of sarahdavis.co. So those are probably the best places to find me. And yeah, sign up for the newsletter. You don't get spammed. I don't have time to run many updates.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Damien. Have a great day.